Okay, just getting set up. Alrighty. Final steps and all that. Guessed right on the lighting, looks like.
Looks good.
All right. Yeah, Jersey Drozd is, I'll mention that when I actually hit record or what have you. He is not joining us to co-host this episode today. And so, right, good luck, Jersey, out on your mission out in the world, making comics great everywhere. And we are about to do this. So normally the podcast has the whole show art and music stuff, and this one will be minimal as far as the YouTube stream. And when you download it via the other channels, it'll have the art and the intro and outro music. But anyway, without any further delay, I think we are ready to get going. Are you ready, Kate?
I'm ready.
All right. Okay. Welcome to another episode of the Lean Into Art Cast. This is a show where oftentimes we explore visual storytelling, but also like creative independent projects and all sorts of topics surrounding that stuff. And we love to really think hard about it. And we don't hold back on questioning and exploring, because we know that by doing that we get joined by others who do that as well, which is super awesome. So thank you for joining us and taking part in this kind of learning exploration. And I'm Rob Stenzinger, one of the co-hosts of Lean Into Art, and I have a special guest co-host today, Kate Shields Stenzinger. Welcome, Kate.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah. I'm a designer, visual storyteller, facilitator of creative processes, and UX designer. And Kate, what do you do? Like, you do a lot of different things, right?
What do I do?
Yeah.
I have a blog at Babies Love Comics. I do some blogging. I do a lot of creating, a lot of different craftsperson type work, whether it be sewing or knitting or jewelry, creating different things, as well as I'm a mama. And so, of course, the world doesn't have enough mommy bloggers. So I do lots of creative projects with children, my own, as well as, other children that, we come into contact with and know through our kids, and do a lot of different creative, energetic work with them.
I've seen this firsthand, and it's, yeah. So we'll be, so channeling our different perspectives into this topic, which is, we're looking at the learning process, which can feel a bit meta, a bit sort of less tangible. But I think we're going to find really, specific ways to explore that. And, like we've done of late, we've swapped our format, where typically we would go from the high level and talk about theory and then get practical in the second part of the podcast. But we've swapped that now through just, encountering other inspiration and seeing how it can be a really great way to explore topics by just doing some like really practical hands-on stuff, like and really specific examples before we get into picking out the topic in a way that gives us this sort of want to find the bigger strategies and theory surrounding it. So this will be a lot of fun, because this is not just about learning, but also some of the experiences around it, and how we can have an easy time in some contexts, difficult time in other contexts.
Yeah, I think really how we learn, why we learn, how we approach learning. I'd like to explore and talk about, what were we taught about learning as we were growing up, and what are we trying to teach others about learning, whether it be children or colleagues or coworkers. What do we express about learning, and how learning should be happening? So I think there'll be some interesting conversation we can have around that.
Awesome. And well, before we'll get going on all this stuff, is that we, think it's important to mention the sponsors of this podcast, and show our gratitude for that. Even though it's a little bit funny because really at the time being, the sponsors for Lean Into Art are essentially Jersey Drozd and myself.
Well, we have much gratitude for Jersey Drozd and yourself, so
Well,
that's great. Let's mention them.
All right, let's not be afraid of that. And so, okay, let's take a minute and talk about our projects that you can support. That by doing that, it supports this show. So, if you are, and I imagine, who isn't looking for new, interesting stories to read about and fun, approachable adventures that you can recommend without any resistance to any audience. And of course, I'm talking about Jersey Drozd's story about a bear and a bird going on adventures, righting wrongs, and just really sort of channeling in the whole independent creator life in behind. You can find these messages in there, and it's called Boulder and Fleet. Really sweet, beautifully rendered comic, super fun. You can go check it out at boulderandfleet.com, and you can support Jersey's efforts for that at patreon.com/Jersey. And now there is also a game that I created and collaborated with you on.
Yeah.
Kate.
This Panda Needs You, and This Panda Does Need You.
Mm-hmm.
It's a great all-ages game, really focused on some early learning math skills for young children. So it's shape and color sorting, super fun game, some stacking abilities.
Right on. Where this little panda walks into a situation and there's a stack of blocks and a cloud comes along and knocks him down. And where you come in is you help the panda.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah. Well, you help the panda. This is why the panda needs you. So
that's why the panda needs you. And
you put things back to the way they were, and the game gives you feedback along the way. I heard on a podcast recently how it's pretty rare when games have feedback via music. And it just so happens that this panda actually, there are stages of sort of intensity in the music that and I'm not talking speed metal intensity. I'm talking about upbeat, hooray intensity and parade level, not mosh pit level. And so what happens is, as you're making progress, the music's giving you feedback. The panda's giving you feedback by dancing around and celebrating your progression and however you're figuring out those different scenes and putting the blocks back together.
Yep, I think I'll just add the game is really very much all ages. An iPad savvy 2-year-old to all ages able to do it. It does have kind of the drag and drop sorting, so they have to be able to kind of do that fine motor piece. It's a great way to build some of those fine motor skills as well.
That's awesome. And then the third way, if you are well, okay, those other projects, those are cool, good for you. I hope they go well, but I'm more interested in this sort of approach of presenting topics that you use on the podcast. Well, we do have some options for you at leanintoart.com/workshops, and you can pick from a variety of options that are all pay what you feel is appropriate, honestly. So you could pay $0 and just check it out, and you are investing time, and we appreciate that, to explore what's available there. But of course, you can essentially think this is actually really helpful. I've done some workshops on using your storytelling skills to make informed design choices about the sort of experience surrounding the things you're putting online. So maybe you're putting out a webcomic, and the workshop storytelling to make your comics UI awesome would be for you. You might also be thinking about things that are just comics and sound, and how does that work? And there's an amazing workshop by Jersey Drozd called Fatam, and that's
Fatam.
Yeah, and it's about making sound tangible and communicate key things that you wish to have it express in your stories. And it's really great from like an overall, like, what are some possibilities there, to like, well, how could you make that happen? And like the skills that are demonstrated work in pretty much any kind of app, whether you're working analog or digital. And it's really great. And you can find out all about that stuff at leanintoart.com/workshops.
Excellent.
Thanks. And well, so our topic, and thinking about like what are some examples of this, of sort of like our creative processes and how we're approaching learning, and like exploring the, like, what does it feel like beginning, middle, and end, and that kind of thing.
Well, I think there's a lot of ways that, especially in our family, that we explore learning. And I think most people are very experiential learners, hands-on learners, right? And that's something that we promote a lot in our family, is really kind of digging in and doing experiential learning. And also, on top of that, we try hard to make sure that we celebrate the failures. And one of the things, and we've talked about this a couple of times, many times actually, but one of the things that happens with learning and the experiential learning in failure is kind of, what's that balance between understanding that failure is going to happen and accepting failure, and not getting incredibly overconfident or cocky. And that's, kind of always a challenge. And so how do we create a safe place, or a fun place, or a growth place, if you will, environment to allow all of those things kind of to happen for learning?
It's, oh gosh, okay. I think that is a very handy framing, and it reminds me of incidents. And I mean, since you brought in family, it's which is super welcome. But thinking about like how sometimes when I see, well, one of our kids doing something in a way that is reflecting how I might approach things, that's quite a wild experience, because I've noticed that I might feel, I think I'm presenting an oversimplified view of learning sometimes, where maybe it's like celebrating a little bit early, or conveying wrong, sort of, or easily misconveying the process of building confidence before jumping into something that might be a bit risky, and then instead of, I might be thinking, oh yeah, like I'm sharing a lot of confidence, and that's very useful, because then you can weather all sorts of problems. But then like I'll take on creative challenges and have up and down experiences through those, and then try to be pretty transparent to as far as what that's like. But then I think sometimes, like, some messages seem to be resonating more with the audience I'm thinking about versus others, where it's like, oh, this is all awesome, I'm awesome, everything, like, no matter what, I can't do wrong, or what have you. And that's not really my intent.
So the question I want to ask is, so where does the confidence come from? So you're taking on something new, you're going to try something new, you need to do learning. And I can speak from having spent many years with you, that I know you often take on challenges that I'm trying to think how I described it the other day, but it's just out of reach, just a little beyond your current skill level, like all the time. Like, that kind of makes you tick. So, but you do approach it with a sense of confidence and a knowing that you're going to struggle, that it's going to be hard. I mean, it's not like you have a confidence where, this is easy, I got this. That's not the kind of confidence you convey. You convey the confidence of, this is going to be challenging, this is going to be hard. I'm going to have to work really hard, but I know I'm going to do this. And where does that come from?
Where does that come from? I think it comes from, well, okay, there's just a lot of pieces to what you just described, because, and this is a fun aspect and a challenging aspect of having you on the show, because it is a little bit like,
inside baseball.
Inside
Insider
baseball.
trading.
You have a perspective that no listener of the podcast could possibly have, even if they've listened to multiple hundred episodes of extra. If you combine extra lean and lean into art and all that, and the Polytechnicast, what have you. But so where does that come from?
Yeah,
it's okay.
Well, and here's why I ask. Okay, because I think working to define that is something I think we should harness. That is something I would love to be able to coach and teach, kids, yes, but also to folks, to people that I work with, to people that I encounter day to day, to the teams that I'm building, to the teams that I'm working with in my regular day job, to have a team that has a sense of confidence of, this is going to be difficult, this is going to be challenging, this is a little out of our reach, this is something we've not done before, but we know we're going to do it, and we know we're going to get it done, and yep, we're going to fail along the way, and that's okay, because we're going to figure it out.
So at different stages of my life, I would have answered this question pretty differently, and I can't easily separate all those different perspectives. But right now, I think it comes from a place of good fortune, deep privilege, and I know because of the safety to attempt things, the capacity and life circumstance to try things that are on one hand supremely optional to survival, yet incredibly beneficial to explore how I might grow. And that's a very fortunate situation to be in. And I in some ways, feeling that, feeling fortunate helps with picking the next thing, because I feel like then I'm not taking it for granted that I am able to, by continuing to apply, take on new risks, there's I can feed into a system, and then hopefully that doesn't only benefit me, I can share it too, because hopefully I can capture the experience as I go, and then hold my so the experience is only just one portion of it, right? Where there's that's like an effort or a performance, but then there's the afterward, there's the option to then reflect and also potentially share it.
Well, and that's what I was going to ask next, I think. So what I think I heard you say, or what I heard you say, and I'm inferring a little bit in there, going through the learning, going through the exercise, accomplishing it, learning
or not,
but learning itself has a reward for you. Right? So even if you're going through and you're working on something and it's a flop, it fails, you have the attitude, and I do too, I'm not trying to make it sound like I don't, as I do, but the attitude of, this was a failure, but here's the things I learned from it. Mm-hmm. Particularly around creative projects. I mean, let's take it to the creative world. Creative projects, I can think of several, actually. My brain just flooded with 6 or 7 examples of creative projects that I've worked on that have failed, that have not worked out.
Well, let's provide an example.
Fond memories of...
what do you mean by fail, and what would be an example of a project that failed?
Well, and I guess that's all in the eye of the beholder, right? So what immediately came to mind is there's a few jewelry projects that didn't turn out the way I expected. There's a couple of unfinished sewing pieces upstairs
Sure.
for multitude of reasons. And then obviously pottery is a big one. So I, for years, was a potter, and I was, I will say, never a good one. I love to make glazes, and I love to glaze, but I would put beautiful glazes on dumpy pots. Everybody's got their thing. And so it was, part of it was learning to love the process. And I think that's where some of this gets to. And that's easy to do when it's a hobby, and not as easy to do when it's a job or an expectation that you're trying to...
Or a service
that you're trying to earn money from.
Yeah.
Right?
Engage in trade.
Engage in trade.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. So let's see.
I know, I was kind of all over the place there.
Not really. That's the nature of exploring this kind of thing. So you reminded me with your example of pottery, how it's easy to like simplify a discipline by like one label that is actually a lot of disciplines inside of that label. Because a lot of different things that we make are based on components that give us the capability to assemble some other thing. So I don't have to make paper when I draw. I don't have to make all the inks and colors when I draw. In this Inktober, I'm experimenting with a few different things, like the tempera ink, no, not tempera inks, acrylic inks, and large format. Not for every day, this for the challenge, but trying to fit in like way bigger things than I've drawn than in a long time, just physically bigger.
Physically bigger, it's fun
to
watch you do that.
Oh, cool! Let's see. So why am I?
Well, can I interrupt?
There's so many levels to that I'm enabled to try this thing that has this convenient label because of how many other capabilities other people have shared, kind of thing, right? So like, you're mentioning pottery. That is, there's a lot of, there are many elements that create a greater depth than just, well, I throw a pot and I somehow add glaze to it, right? I mean, each of those, like, I watched you study the process, like
chemistry.
Yeah, the chemistry of glaze, and I was blown away because I had no idea how much depth there was to that, and not being like, chemistry is not a strength of mine. I was amazed at the complexity and reminded how easy it is to oversimplify when there's a thing on the shelf, I can grab that thing and then just go accomplish a task, right? Because essentially someone else has provided this capability for me to then go do that thing. But anyway, so there's a lot of depth to what you just described.
Okay, this might not come out coherent, but let me try.
You've caught my disclaimer disease.
Kind of have, haven't I?
Yeah.
What you just said was fascinating to me from the standpoint of, you started out talking about there are so many components, and that the components have built upon each other. And you even mentioned socially, or from like a societal standpoint, you're able to build things. And I know you do a lot of open source software, and you work with different open source softwares where you are taking components that other people have built, and you're adding your components, or you're changing things and putting it back into the community. And what's fascinating to me about that is, if you take learning theory and strip it all down, like just at its very basic level, that's how learning works. Learning works by taking very simple building blocks and adding to them, right? And so you can think of top-down, bottom-up learning, kind of the two different ways of cognition learning. And I'm not going to be able to explain it right now that I've said that out loud. But
take a swing.
So, building on the different components, right? So, learning is additive, right? So if you think like at the basic level with children, right? So first, a kid is going to learn that four-legged thing walking around is a cat, right? It's got four legs, it walks around, it's fuzzy, it's cat. Then the child goes outside and they see a four-legged thing that's fuzzy walking around, and it's a dog, but they point at it and they're going to say cat,
Hmm.
right? Until they can add those components.
Hmm.
That's how learning works. And it's just kind of exactly like what you said. Like when you sit down to do large format art, you don't have to go make your ink. I don't know. It just struck me as kind of a parallel or almost a meta with how learning works and in being adaptive. And if you think about, even take it to our creative spaces, and I know everybody's doing, not everybody, but a lot of you are all doing Inktober, which is so fascinating to watch, and just really cool to see all the different creations that people are doing out there, and the different ways people are challenging themselves. And so we'll have to talk about that too, how challenges feed into learning. But it's additive. You've got a skill. I know how to draw with a pencil. I know how to draw with a pen. This is Inktober. Now I'm going to expand that. I'm going to try and add some additional skills to that. Or I had another example and it just escaped me, so I'll stop there.
Well, and in general, let's say that one of the attractive things about challenges like Inktober is that it's saying, well, it's not infinite, but we're going to go ahead and add a thing to every single day that you may not always have that thing in your day for whatever reason. And even if you have it in your day, this is one more. So it's implied that it's a stretch. Through stretching, you will grow greater capacity. And then...
Do you think it's human nature to feed off these challenges? Or there's an or do you think that there is something unique about artists? Because I will say the artists I know all love a challenge, all love a good creative challenge. You see this when you go to different cons or different creative activities. You guys will do, everything from a drink and draw to where you've got comic panels and somebody draws the first one, you pass it in the next and the next. Mm-hmm. Those kinds of even social work and social challenges to 30 and 30 Inktober. There's been a lot of them. 30 characters in 30 days is what I meant there.
Yeah, right on. And NaNoWriMo.
Yeah.
24-hour comic day.
Oh, yeah. Let's not forget 24-hour comic day. You people are amazing to watch, but you cause me to scratch my head a little bit. Is it unique to artists, or is this the way learning works for everybody? And everybody just has their own
That's
form
funny.
of it.
Well, okay.
What do you think?
I think this is an awesome question that I was hoping to get to later, but why not explore it now? Why not? Why not explore it now? Because it's essentially learning is in a way the information version of evolution, right? That learning lets you breed and grow and have generation of ideas live and die, and then and grow stronger over time because they have been tested and integrated ideally in the world around you. And so all of a sudden, at some point, you have some additional capacity or capability, a skill or endurance to apply a skill because you have put yourself in the position to go through that kind of process. So does that is that limited to artists? I no, I don't think so, but I do think artists inherently put themselves in a position to end up making more of that process obvious to the world around them. Where you're sharing your work on Tumblr, you're putting things out wherever, Instagram and Twitter, and you are creating these snapshots of like a combination of like what you're what you're able and interested to capture and execute and then share, and how you share it and everything around it, that then that's like a generation. And then there's a next generation, and each one can learn from the next. And so as an artist, you're just like sharing that. And likely there's some sort of story or progression from one generation to the next. So I think it's universal, but just more obvious in artists.
Well, and maybe that's just the world that I'm more exposed to too.
Yeah.
You know, as I think through examples, I mean, it's kind of the circles that we run in, if you will.
No doubt.
The exposure we have.
No doubt. So thinking about like, how are you practicing this kind of, like, what's something that you're doing that is benefiting your creative process right now? Like a thing you added.
I know we talked all about you and the challenges that you like to take on. So I think we have somewhat different approaches, I'll say. I don't necessarily think that we have super different styles, but different approaches to learning and creative projects, and particularly the creative process. Maybe I'll call it that. So one thing that is important for me to be able to get into that creative space is actually meditation, and taking the time to sit, and the ability to stop and just turn inward and clear the mind clutter. Wow, I'm sounding very new agey right now, but it's true. It's how I kind of, what I need to do in order to be able to kind of get in that creative space. My day, I often feel like it's kind of go, 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 go. And if I don't stop and take that, to borrow a term, purposeful pause, my tank runs empty, and I've got nothing left to put into the creative process. And I sit and I'll stare at the blank screen to write a blog article, or I'll, stare at some fabric and have no idea what to do next. And but if I stop and I sit and I take even 10 minutes of meditation, it helps for me to clear that space.
So I'm not, completely disconnected from that world.
Oh gosh, no.
But like, no, and I'm not trying to like jump in and own it too, but like that's definitely more of an emphasis for you. And at the same time, like, wait a minute, what do you mean that? How does adding pausing
right
help?
Yeah, and it's an interesting concept, and I think you maybe have a similar thing that happens for you with adding challenges. But so how is adding one more thing making more space in my day? And it really does. And that's a very big struggle that I have with myself. I don't have time to do X. I don't have time to do Y. So how can I find the time to stop and sit? But find the time to stop and sit, and it's amazing what can transform. Additionally, I'll say, and meditation is a personal thing, and it's a journey piece, right? 10 minutes a day, fantastic way to, again, clear some of the mental clutter, train your mind to take those pauses. But it doesn't have to be done that way, and there's no right or wrong, and that's one of the things with meditation. And there's some great resources out there where you can sit and have, thoughts going the whole time. And you know what? That's okay. You sat down, you did it. You pick up and you do it again. I'll miss, 3, 4, 7, 10 days in a row of not having time to sit. So what? You get back up, you do it again the next time. One other thing I'm going to say is there's also other simple strategies. I used the term purposeful pause earlier, which I've borrowed from the Institute of Mindful Leadership. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes. It can be a 30-second check-in before you move to the next thing, whether that be in your day job, the next phone call, or the next meeting. I'm just going to take 30 seconds. I'm going to check in with where I'm at I'm going to check in with my mind, with my body. How am I feeling? I mean, just even checking in with your physical self can help to kind of be ready to be more accepting for learning. So to kind of bring it back full circle to learning is really the goal, at least for me, in that is to be more receptive to ideas that are coming, to the collaboration with people around me, to the ideas that I have, and some of that trusting your gut helps when there's that. I don't want to say clarity because it's not always clarity, but less mind clutter.
It sounds like a potentially giant topic, but and I say that because, well, it sounds like there's a lot to explore, and like how could we possibly explore that whole concept in one episode? But really interesting in how, okay, so you take a purposeful pause and you have some greater connection to your current state and or the world around you, and that how do you think that helps learning? One or two examples. Not just, so you mentioned the collaboration thing, but what about you? Is it helping something that you already thought about, that you're oh, I'm trying to learn blank, or does it come up in the moment?
This is going to sound really cliche and silly, but it creates this space. So let's say, for example, I'm trying to learn a new technique, a new art technique of some sort, and I'm maybe not fully present for either.
Well, I've watched you pick up blogging off and on and just pick it up again. Is that tied to this?
Sure.
Mindfulness? Okay.
Yeah. So, well, and I think I mentioned this earlier, right? Sit down and I've had, busy day, lots going on, 100 ideas in my head, a million things going on. You sit down, you stare at the blank piece of paper and nothing comes out. And then the mind fills. This probably doesn't happen for anyone else and any artists out there. I'm sure this doesn't happen for you, but the mind fills with doubt, self-doubt, and I don't have anything interesting to say, and I don't have anything useful to share. And for me, sometimes it's I haven't researched this topic deep enough, or I need to go back to some text book that I've had in the past, or, hey, I used to know this off the top of my head, and today my brain is so full I can't recall it. So to kind of understand some of those stressors or those doubts that really are barriers to learning. I mean, if you think about it, all of that stuff, fear is a huge barrier to learning. Huge barrier to learning. And so to kind of tear those down. And I'm sure there's a million ways to do this, right? Yeah, some people run, some people, watch The Real Housewives. I don't know. But there's a lot of ways to kind of bring some of that stress down and bring some of, clear some of that fear so that people are open to learning.
Okay. I think that makes a lot of sense in that.
I hope so.
How, well, there's always narrative bias in there's things that happen and I can, I can associate, one thing leads to another and I've got assumptions and I can roll with that. But I also, independent of that, think what you said makes sense. And it's the, being open and sort of, it's almost it sounds like a reset button, right? Where the, some sort of block or something impeding, being ready to learn or dive into a thing where it's this is I gotta switch gears and get to my creative project, and I at the same time I'm not just putting out a thing, I'm learning a thing to be able to put out a thing, and that could be territory pretty easy to get sort of bogged down by doubt and fears. So creating some openness and space to be able to do that, like that sounds like a pretty tangible benefit to that.
It works for me. I mean, I like it.
And obviously it works for me is very much we're sharing our own experiences and maybe with an article or a link here or there, but in this topic, in this episode, this is purposefully how we're approaching it. So
can I ask you a question?
Yeah, what's up?
What type of learner are you? Are you an auditory learner, a visual learner, some other
Dragon Ball Z character? Is that one of your options?
Yes. Are you a Dragon Ball Z character learner?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, what I am is because of what we all are, and also I want everybody to become stronger. So I'm pretty much a Dragon Ball Z character.
Okay, but what's your preferred learning style? I'm trying to go a little more concrete than Dragon Ball Z learning.
Fair enough. Okay, so if the metaphor doesn't work.
But no, the metaphor is good, but here's my point. Like, I have often gone through life feeling like I don't know if I'm an auditory learner or a visual learner. Like, I feel like I'm more of a visual learner. And if you think back to school, right, we've all have shared experience of going to school. Did you do better when it was, go read the book? Did you do better when it was what the teacher was, teaching? Is it some sort of combination? And I'm sure everybody had, like a combination. And I think the adult learning theory talks about, as long as you were taught in more than one way, like more than one sensory thing. Wow,
yeah, learning modalities. You're talking about learning modalities. So
that's better than sensory thing.
Sensory thing. That works too. So we, I would guess that the audience of podcast listeners is likely bent toward being an audio learner.
Interesting.
And I don't know if that I have not. I've done zero research to prove this, but
I'm curious what you think you are. Like,
I mean, what
do
I think
you
I
know
am.
what you are? Because I feel like I don't have a clear sense of how I learn best. Is that a weird thing to
How
say?
do I learn best? I think, okay, so I might be in a more efficient mode or less efficient mode depending on what's available. I do think I work well with audio and visual and written. So I'm kind of an omni-learner, but I know...
What is omni-learner?
I've just made it up.
Okay.
I made it up, and it's... Yet, okay, that can sound silly, but of course it really depends on the sort of the how much am I connecting with the materials that that are being shared, because if the quality of the performance is resonating with me, like, it really doesn't matter it as far as the medium. And I think the one that's at greatest risk is visual, because it can be easy to make lots of assumptions and have missing information visually. But that if that's reinforced with a little bit of text and other, like, narrative, that helps a lot. And so, yes, comics are pretty awesome for this. But also, like, yeah, I mean, I consume a fair amount of books through audio and podcasts. And so I would say, if I had to pick one, maybe that's the strongest.
I was just curious.
But a great diagram or a great comic, it's super efficient. I once read a book called the 80-20 principle, which is essentially the Pareto principle. That's the concept that, well, you can get 80% of the benefit from 20% of the thing, right? Whether that's a book or
I like that.
Yeah, or most any concept.
I only have to read 20% of the books now.
Ironically, the book, the Pareto principle, is what taught me to read the beginning and the end of a book and then look at the index and then maybe hop around a little bit and then be done.
Like it.
So I wonder how well the middle of that book is written.
Right?
Because because the book basically teaches you to not read it. So I have no idea, but like, yeah, that was a fun.
That's awesome. Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, I do feel like I'm a very slow reader compared to other folks I've encountered. I enjoy reading, but I need to be comfortable with how much time that's going to take compared to other ways.
There's a book on speed reading.
True. Yeah, I have that actually, and it's not clicked with me. But so far,
It's interesting. I remember years and years ago reading probably the first 5 pages or first 20 pages of the speed reading book, so maybe I did catch it all. But a lot of it had to do, and this is interesting, this is going to go back to learning, a lot of it had to do with learning to trust that your brain is picking it up. A lot of the theory around speed reading, at least, and again, this was like 25 years ago, reading this book, and it had to do with you have to trust that your brain is picking it up.
All right.
I don't know.
I like this. So I think so how are our brains picking this stuff up? What are our strategies? Like, so we talked about some learning approaches and whatnot. We talked about, and maybe we'll bring up a little bit more of like one of the things that comes up often as a topic on Lean Into Art as a strategy is, well, reflection and journaling. And well, let's explore this stuff a little bit further and also be free to go as theoretical as we want. And coming right up after our next break.
Words from this new sponsor.
Yeah. All right. Well, and as I'm pausing here to find the
Where's the new sponsor?
yeah. So I okay. So what's next? What do we want to thank? What else supports this show? Well, essentially, listeners like you. There are those of you that we're going to give a little bit of a shout out to, and thank you very much to, because you are supporting Lean Into Art on Patreon, which is a fantastic resource for creative folks of all stripes that honestly you should go check out if you're listening to this show and you're making stuff. Check out patreon.com, but then also consider supporting us at patreon.com/leanintoart. And so I wrote a script that randomizes a list of supporters to pick and thank, and I'm just going to do my best to share 5 of those with you right now. So my heartfelt thanks and Jersey thanks. Those of you like this, I'm sorry, Animal Cracker Death Parade, also known as Cam Callahan. Thank you for I'm at whatever your subject matter is, Cam Callahan. I need to go check it out, what have you. And so yeah, Cam Callahan on Twitter. Thank you for supporting us. Kelly Ishikawa. Kelly of Ishikawa is how you can reach her on Twitter. And thank you very much for supporting us via Patreon. Marshall Kocher. He's at Marsh Makes Art on Twitter. Thank you very much for supporting us, Marshall. And Mark Falk, or The Chagall on Twitter. _SHAGAL on Twitter. Nathan Seabolt, who I don't have his Twitter handle right here because some folks put that into their Patreon stuff. Some folks don't. Totally cool either way. But Nathan, thank you. We know you're there and you're supporting us, and we deeply appreciate it. So your support means a lot to us. Join in with these other fine folks and the others that are out there on patreon.com/leanintoart. And, choose to support us with whatever you feel makes sense. $1, $2 a month, what have you. It's either way, deeply, deeply appreciated.
Yeah, much gratitude to the Patreon supporters. I think that's just an awesome community.
It is. And yeah, lots of benefits to that as well that are, we'll cover that a little bit later in our third break. And Okay, so we ask some questions before that pause, and what we're trying to do here now is start to explore, well, how do we learn to learn, and like when does that come up in our projects? So I know you had some thoughts on things like strategies, early childhood things, some examples there. So I mean, this
So,
process starts when we're pretty small, doesn't it?
yeah. And so, how do we learn to learn, right? And so, of course, early on, early childhood, it's very baked into who we are. We explore our world. We start exploring, we at some point in our little lives were handed a crayon, and we taste it because why not? We taste everything at that age, and then eventually we put it on the paper. And most of us, this is what we do when we first get a crayon, and we just beat the
We stab the paper.
we stab the paper. But eventually we start to notice,
Hence the very thick crayons, which helps.
which still break,
Ah,
but and they make crayons in all sorts of crazy shapes now. But at any rate, that's typically the first experience that we have. But from there, we're maybe pounding with our crayon, and eventually a line happens, right? Our arm slips because we don't have the great fine motor control just yet. But now we've noticed that the line is there. Again, think of learning theory. I have this experience. I'm holding this in my hand. I can, I have control of my hand now. I can move it. I've tasted it. It's not something to eat, so I don't need to taste it again. I'm gonna, just in case, because maybe it'll change. I'm gonna taste it a few more times, but nothing to eat.
it still isn't good.
It's still not good for most of us. Some of you, though, you might have thought it was good.
So art might end as soon as we have flavored crayons.
It's like the smelly markers. At any rate, I love when my kids come home with marker on their nose, and I'm like, oh, smelly markers today. But so then you've done the line, right? And so now the line thing has happened, and so this object can make a colorful line on a piece of paper. And then you notice that the crayons come in different colors, right? That starts to happen. And they all can do this line. And then if I go back and forth, and you can see how that would build and how that grows. So that's part of how learning happens. Now, but what happens if the first time you take the crayon and you've tasted it and someone yells at you? And then you take the crayon and you do your pounding, right? You do your pounding on the paper and someone yells at you. How much more exploration is going to happen? Now, it depends on the kid, obviously, and this is a completely theoretical example, but my point being that learning happens best when we feel safe, when we feel supported, when we feel open to explore. That's when the most learning happens. And as a parent, that can be a challenge to allow, some of that exploration. As a manager, that can be a challenge to allow your team to do some of that exploration if it's a newer skill for some of those folks. As a member of a collaborative design team, it can be a challenge to allow others to do some of that exploration. Because maybe we've done this before. Maybe we have a really solid idea of how this design should work. And trying different things can make us uncomfortable, make us concerned for the length of the project, the duration of the project, the success of the project, those types of things. So it's not always easy. I mean, group collaboration type stuff is difficult, but that's where the most learning is going to happen.
You reminded me. I forgot to mention, you've been on 3 other episodes of the show before, right? And
that is fact.
And thankfully you do come back. Something is working out, or maybe your learning process isn't working. I don't know, or it's awesome and everything's good. So you're reminding me. I'm trying to scroll back here. Like So you were first on episode 76, Everyone Doubts. And that was a lot of fun exploring like some of
Yeah, I
this.
can talk about doubt all day long. I brought it up on this episode too,
No,
self-doubt and all of that. That's
no,
funny.
it fits into learning, right? I
It
mean,
does. It absolutely
and you've
does.
also been on the show with asking uh, tough creative project questions with David Say, who is also
That
a
was
guest.
super fun.
Mm-hmm. And you were on episode 128 talking about creative project conflict resolution. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things related into this topic that talking about having the space to learn, and then the feeling or the willingness to feel comfortable, safe, open to exploring that situation. Um, that's really like, I mean, the early childhood examples really like, and honestly, all of them. It's like, well, how do we bring back that kind of um, openness? How do we bring it back to where like it's a good idea for us to continue to do new things on our project because the world around us is changing and adapting, and there are um, there are whole industries of consulting surrounding strategy and business and how do you do this, and in a way that it's about making it helping others feel confident and safe toward trying new stuff, to not see their business stop and because they've been defeated, they can no longer bring things to market or what have you, or the there's a lot of demand. How do we create that capacity to?
Have you talked about the how to create good teams research?
I have mentioned it. I don't know if I've mentioned it on the main podcast. So we do lean into art, and we also do extra lean, and that's kind of the every other week thing. And lean into art, it's always like a topic. Extra lean, it's like this. It's more free flowing, and it's we just sort of wing it, and it's fun. And I know it's come up. I just yeah.
So what I'm referring to is there's some research that was done by Google around what makes a successful team. And I know you've looked at some of it. I've looked at some of it. I haven't gotten through all of it, of course, but it's very interesting that some of the findings they're having, it's actually not as straightforward as they thought it was going to be when they first kind of embarked on doing this research. They thought, is it going to be a mix of introverts and extroverts? Is it going to be when all the extroverts are together or when all the introverts are together? Is it going to be when you've got a really strong manager or a micromanaging manager or these different things? And there were no patterns. There was a complete lack of patterns, which was very frustrating for them. But one of the things that they've kind of continued to kind of peel away and look at some of the intangibles and some of the, I think they called it like the unwritten rules of the group, more of almost the group culture. And some of this was discussed. Is it, safe to share different ideas? Is it, I'm not thinking of the other ones, but
it's psychological safety was the big
safety.
measure they landed on.
And one of the other things that I remembered kind of reading, going through it is, does everyone get an opportunity to participate?
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about it in the terms of the most successful groups that they found when there was I don't know if it was in a meeting context, but a work progress going on. The most successful ones were the ones where everyone had throughout the experience an equal opportunity to speak and to share. And that I think also goes to some of this psychological safety of feeling like you can kind of contribute or share your ideas and your thoughts.
and that's it is such a wild thing to consider, is that we can be in a circumstance that like this, like a circumstance A is we feel open and capable and able to act upon this this thing that has some ambiguity, that we don't know exactly how it's going to turn out, but like we will discover through embarking on that. And in another circumstance, that looks like dying. That looks like scared. No thanks. Never, ever, ever am I going to do that. And really, it's just this. In some ways, it is. It's an internal perspective. It's like what environment, what context are you in? Which is one of the reasons why I expressed a lot of gratitude for life circumstance that where I feel open to doing some things that I try, and that so I think like psychological safety on a team is like one specific example of like this would contribute to that overall feeling of safety and wellness, where okay, yeah, go ahead, don't know what's going to happen, but you're curious and you're going to try it. Like, what do you do when, okay, is there a way to overcome, like, you're curious, you kind of want to try it, but then the absence of the safety is there, or like, what do you do? Like, like, I mean, I know what, like, you know, late teens, early 20s me would be like, you know, just saying, like, standing up on the tallest rock going, you gotta want it, you know.
So this goes back to my original comment about you have a confidence, right? Innate within you, like, and that's what I was saying is, you know, where does that, how do you build that up? Because even if you don't know how to do it, you're like, I'm gonna figure it out. So I think that's funny that you say that, because that's exactly what you would have done. And it's because you've got that. Me, I would probably, in an unsafe place, I would have gone I'm going to work so damn hard that I can figure this out, but I'm going to keep my mouth shut until I've got it figured out.
Oh, nice.
You know,
it's like secret lab.
Yeah.
Where like,
yeah.
Okay.
And
you find a way to make the safety, but like it's just in this small safe zone.
Yeah.
That is private, actually.
Yeah, very, very much so.
Interesting.
And I think probably not as effective as, and not supportive, right? I mean, we learn best when we're collaborative. There's also something to be said. I mean, we're going to talk a little learning theory, right?
Okay.
Which we've already talked about, but there's also something to be said for when are you ready to learn the different things? There's research out there, and I don't have it at my fingertips, but there's research out there that talks about the brain and brain development and what we know about kids. And if you think back, and for some of us way back, to algebra, learning algebra for the first time, algebra is typically taught in the 7th grade. Well, okay, back in the day, I'm not sure what they do now. They got a whole new math thing going. But back in the day, algebra was typically introduced in 7th grade and then taught again in 9th grade. And for many of us, myself, I remember very, very well, in the 7th grade, being taught algebra and imaginary numbers was the most stressful thing in the world. I didn't get it. I did not understand it at all. For me, math had to do with numbers. I didn't know what you want me to do with these symbols, and I just have no clue what you mean by X and Y. 9th grade, it was like the most obvious thing in the world, and I couldn't figure out why I didn't understand it previously. I remember going through those feelings and those emotions, and it has to do with where the cognitive development is. And that's exactly why, at the time, the education system taught this at both 7th grade and 9th grade, because some of the kids were ready for it at 7th grade, needed that challenge, needed to kind of keep pushing forward, and they were ready to kind of work through some of that algebraic stuff. And some of us, our brains weren't there yet. We did not have that cognitive development to deal with some of that ambiguity in a math, which, you know, was felt at the time anyway, very structured. So that's why it was set up to be taught that way. So I bring that up here to say that you go to learn something and it just doesn't work, and it just doesn't work, and it just doesn't work for you. And then 6 months later, 5 months, 5 years later, whatever the case may be, you go to learn it and suddenly, boom, it clicks.
I remember that happening to me personally, right? Where
Hold on, I have one joke.
Yeah, go for it.
So oddly enough, and there's absolutely no brain research on this, but knitting was that way for me.
Oh.
Didn't get it. And one day sat down with my mom, who's, grandma, and she shows me, and just boom, it clicked. And all of a sudden I could do it. Anyway, sorry, that was funny to me. But.
No, that is fun. No. Like, it's not like, I get there's, yeah. I mean, there's layers and, times when we weren't ready, and then when we are ready, and some of that can be due to our development as a human entity, right? Where your brain develops capacities and capabilities at different stages, and I'm way not an expert in any of this. I did pull up a paper at let's see, Frontiers in Human Neuroscience while you were describing this, and it's essentially it seems like it's related to the development of abstract mathematical reasoning. So
yep.
I know that I had not enough capability when I first was taught that, and then when I was taught it later, it made a lot more sense. Is that, and right, I would need to explore more on the topic to feel confident in saying like, oh, for sure it was my brain development, or was it, how I connected with the teacher more or less? I don't know.
Or even what was going on, socially for you. Mm-hmm. Was it, kind of a safe space to learn those things? Obviously there's tons and tons of variables there, but the math one, I know there is research out there that kind of shows that readiness for the abstract thinking. That's a much better way to put it.
Well, and I noticed a thing where I'm trying to, what was I looking at? So yes, so many different channels and stuff that I consume in a given day, but like, it was related to how, I think it was the latest episode of the Galaxy of Super Adventure podcast, where there was a group of artists after so the Galaxy of Super Adventure is a fantastic podcast with Jersey Droz, Ben Hatke, and Zach Giolongo, who the story of it is that they rent a spaceship that they go, that's like their co-working space. Like, if any comic artist could do that, why wouldn't you? And so they're co-working up in space, and then they run into all sorts of characters and stuff. Somehow they got into some kind of tax trouble, and then Ben Hatke ended up going to tax jail, and it's like space tax jail, which sounds kind of rough. I recommend checking out the episode. But anyway, after that little, no, I don't know if it's spoilers, but basically they do run into Ben, but then they kind of like bring up like, hey, this reminds us of how we were talking after the A2CAF, Ann Arbor Comics Arts Festival of 2016. And there was this conversation of a variety of comic artists talking about like the things that they didn't like in their work, and what all that description is helping me forget like why I initially brought it up. But it's the that exploration as far as when they learned and why they learned what they learned, I feel like is it's there can be very much like a life circumstance. I remember. So almost like a social one where in some contexts, maybe you're a part of a group of people who are all celebrating learning some particular art versus another. And maybe you have an affinity for the other, but you sort of de-emphasize it because of your current social situation. Or maybe they don't really enjoy art at all, and you happen to be in a sport, and that's the context of all your social connections. That does affect, I think, the sort of relative safety, openness, like obvious capacity to go learn a thing, because it's really obvious and open and interesting if like your whole social group is like, Oh my gosh, that's super fantastic. I'm nothing but encouraging. Here's all this positive reinforcement. Go for it. Yay. You're awesome. I think you're great. Yes, do that. Did you fail? That's okay. You know, like, not all social contexts give that kind of reinforcement.
Sure.
Yeah. Anyway, and like that episode reminded me. There's a lot of great stories. I highly recommend checking it out.
Very cool.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool. Well, I think we have an open question to talk through.
Okay. What is this open question?
So the open question. Are you ready to go to the open question?
I'm ready.
Okay. The open question is. It's kind of a challenge that we're throwing down here to each other. What are some new learning strategies that we want to try? Or what are things... No, I'm just going to leave it there. What are some new learning strategies we want to try?
Okay.
Because I think it's a cop-out to say, or what have you done that worked? Because that was the other part of what I had written down. But no, I'm going to cut that part out and just say, what are new learning strategies we want to try? And I know we've kind of been... I think a little bit all over the place, and I maybe didn't do as great a job as you in Jersey, kind of sticking to the format. So theory was kind of in throughout, but
it's that's true. Theory's never out of the room in a lean into art conversation.
Oh, good.
So
Yeah.
It's good.
So that's, I guess,
your open question.
The open question in the gauntlet I'm throwing down is, what are some learning strategies that we would like to try?
Okay. I think we should answer that in a moment. And first, I want to say thank you to all of you for downloading this and listening to this through whatever podcasting mechanism you are enjoying, whether that's on YouTube or through iTunes or through other apps. That's awesome, because essentially you can go into leanintoart.com and subscribe. You can search for us in the different podcasting spheres and just look for Lean Into Art and subscribe. And what I'm asking for here is just consider showing your support. This costs no money, but a little bit of your time and your attention. So it definitely has some kind of cost to it. It's not zero, because thank you very much to everyone who has supported our show via iTunes ratings and comments, which is so awesome. And we still have like a 5-star rating on iTunes. Super cool. Thank you very much for making that happen. And so you can go to iTunes and share, give us any kind of star rating. You can give this a thumbs up on YouTube, which just sort of helps the YouTube algorithms and mechanisms surface this podcast a little bit more when it's time, when someone out there in the world is searching for helpful art things. And of course, there is more of Lean Into Art. Like, we've got leanintoart.com. You can get the podcast there. But then there's like the other podcast we do, which is called Extra Lean, and that is available on patreon.com/leanintoart. And then in addition to being able to enjoy this whole other podcast, you'll be able to participate, if you're a patron, in like open mic posts, which are more or less like a private forum that we post every month or so that lets you respond to a prompt or just ask your own question. And it's only this little nurturing group of supporters, which is so awesome to take part in. And we deeply appreciate that. Thank you very much if you've already supported us, or if you're thinking about doing it, go out there and give it a shot. Thank you very much. And now we should look at this open challenge, this question of, new learning strategies. What are we doing? Oh, is this for me?
No, it's for both of us. It's for both of us. I'm still thinking. No, it's because I'm still thinking. I think for me, practice is always a big piece of it, right? So practice, getting outside of my comfort zone. But I can't say that those are necessarily new. So that's where I'm struggling a little bit, is what's a new strategy I'm going to try?
It could be an emphasis.
No,
right?
Nope, I've got it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, it could, but no, I have an idea. So I'm going to take a page right out of the Lean Into Art doctrine. We're going to go doctrine on this one. And I'm going to spend more time reflecting on learning and what's working. I think that the reflection on the learning process, which I know you guys talk about a lot, you and Jersey both, and you practice it so much as well. And I see the benefits that it adds to your life. I mean, I see that firsthand. So I think that could be an area, which for me, again, I kind of tend to the, oh, but I'm so busy. It's hard to stop and do that reflection piece. So I'm going to have to find some ways to build that in. And maybe that's something that I borrow you from time to time to listen to those reflections, as opposed to me just like sitting and journaling, which is not a bad strategy either. But I think from a learning perspective, it might be better for me to do a reflection with another person.
That's interesting. Yeah, reflection with another person. That's a podcast, right?
I think it might be. But
I don't know.
You're not asking me to like do like reflecting on my learning publicly, are you?
I'm not saying that needs to happen. I'm just saying that there's a mechanism that's pretty well established for that.
But from a meta perspective, I would be happy to talk about talking about it.
See, that makes it, yeah. And which is a way to make it safe when you're talking about the general thing versus the specific.
Yeah, no, I'm teasing. That's my thought anyway, though.
Okay. So yeah, more reflection. So, yeah, what new learning strategies? I think it's that. I mean, that is just not an easy question. That, so let's see if I think it's this. Okay, I guess my new learning strategy, as I'm verbally thinking it through right now, is, I mean, it's related to how I am attempting to set specific intentions every day. And
if people aren't aware of that, I don't know if have you talked about that much on the podcast?
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit,
yeah,
but you've got a
it.
very nice blog post on it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that is at interactive-storyteller.com. And that's where I blog. And that's where you can also find like the Polytechnic Cast, which more on that in a minute because Art Sound Off's coming up. But, okay. I feel like the progression of learning is greatly reinforced and benefited by a feedback loop that is somehow examined. And it's not just this, I blurt stuff into the world and it does or doesn't do a thing, and I never observe it. It's like, well, do stuff, observe it, and then see how it goes. But then if you're doing like a monthly planning or a yearly goal thing or a weekly whatever, but that's one thing. But then doing something every day, like doing like a task focused, very specific checklist of like, I want to get these things accomplished, that's one thing. But then more of like the learning framing of like, well, what is this and why, and how, like, what kind of change do I want to be able to observe in myself and or in the output that I bring into the world? That I feel like is more about the asking myself, well, why am I going to try stuff today? Mm-hmm. And then checking back with it to see like, well, how did that go? Not every day. Like, so that the intentions thing that I did share in a blog post is that I'm attempting to every day before I literally put my feet down on the floor as I get out of bed, capture some words or thoughts or sentences, whatever seems to come out as far as like, what am I trying to bring into the world today? And a lot of that is sort of like how I want to grow and evolve. So it's very mixed up with learning. It's not necessarily purely learning. But then inherently, if you're making something to serve a purpose, like your creative process is more or less completely tied into learning, whether or not that's explicit. Because
sure. Yeah, it has to be.
Because it's not about, well, I'm going, and this is not to disparage like a purely expressive creative process. Purely expressive creative process doesn't necessarily have to accomplish some given output, service, task, or whatever. It's just an expression. And then you see what happens in the world based on that expression. You maybe have an intent for that. So yeah, I could see some arguments against what I just said too, but like I really want to make a statement about blank, and so yeah, okay, you have some kind of intent, and it has a little bit of service, but yeah. Anyway, that as I argue against myself, yeah, okay, I'll just say that what I'm trying to do is be adding more frequent feedback loops to my learning process.
Excellent.
All right. So, how do you feel about this? Think we took a walk around this topic?
I think we did. I think we may have meandered a bit.
Yeah.
But we shall reflect and learn about our process.
Right on.
I'm a little out of practice. I have to admit, I'm a little out of practice from doing this, but this has been fun, and I really appreciate you and Jersey letting me come and hang out on the podcast from time to time. So
it's awesome having you on as a guest. And when you, you know what? I think one of our thresholds is to make sure that it's been a long time, so we get to know. No, like it's really fun, and you bring a really fun a perspective that is often not like you have some disclaimers about like some of your art and your output and whatnot, but like you are one of us, and you make a lot of things, and you do love to examine it. So thank you for coming on and sharing
thank
that.
you again, and thanks to Jersey for allowing me to sit in his place.
Yes. And yeah, so hopefully Jersey's doing well out in the world, doing his comic ambassadorial work. And you know what? There's a big event coming up that I would be remiss to not mention.
I know. I can't believe I didn't list it when I listed the other crazy challenges that all these artists love.
Well, one thing that we actually started as a creative challenge on, via Lean Into Art is called Art Sound Off.
It's awesome.
And it's all about, you may have heard of other creative challenges in the month of November. November has 30 days. And Art Sound Off is about putting out some kind of reflection about what you make for every day of the month of November. It's not, what?
That could be my new learning.
Oh, really? That'd be awesome.
I've not done Art Sound Off.
Oh, yes.
Before.
I know.
Ooh,
there
we'll have to think about that
There are
one.
approachable ways. So like there are apps that sort of bake in their own sort of ability to share audio and that others can subscribe to via RSS feeds and whatnot.
Sure,
so it's
absolutely.
like very enabling technology that I need to go refresh to see if it's still there, and I hope the company's doing well, because they used to be called Audioboo and now there's something else, and that was a great approachable way, and lots of awesome stuff was shared in previous years for Art Sound Off. This will be the third year, and again, what it's all about, you make stuff, do some reflection about it every day for the month of November as best as you can. And we'll have prompts and ways to sort of engage with that you can use, sometimes use, never use, whatever, what have you. That's all cool. But go to artsoundoff.com to see more about that. And if you're curious about seeing more of the past stuff, search twitter.com for the hashtag artsoundoff, even though some other event did actually use that hashtag as well. But, that's what happens. There's no domain registry for hashtags. And that's all cool. But that's what's coming up. And I feel great about how we explored this topic. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. And I will get this shared after that. And I will add the wrap-up music afterward. But for now, I have been Rob Stenzinger of leanintoart.com and Rob Stenzinger on Twitter. And
I have been Kate Stenzinger at Kate Stenzinger on Twitter and Baby Comics on Twitter.
I'm not going to say okay bye yet, because Baby Comics, that's another huge project you do. And that's another collaboration we've done in addition to This Panda. So yeah, go check out Baby Comics.
Babieslovecomics.com.
Babieslovecomics.com, and also Baby Comics on Twitter.
On Twitter, yep.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for listening. And okay, bye. And here's where I'll add the wrap-up music. And I will say thank you for those of you who have tuned in to the live show. And thanks for downloading it later or checking it out because you found us on YouTube. And you should subscribe, because but you got to go check out, go to comicsaregreat.com/live to subscribe to the main feed. This one's sort of slipping in on the side feed. But thank you very much.